My name is Layla, I'm 48, and right now I feel like my entire world has been pulled out from under me. I spent decades working, saving, and raising my daughter alone, thinking I was giving her everything she could ever need. But last week, she took my pension for a trip, and just like that, the security I had built evaporated. The betrayal hit harder than I ever imagined, like someone had ripped open my chest and rearranged the pieces. And then, when she opened the fridge at that rented apartment, the scream she let out, it's a sound I'll never forget. The morning I discovered my pension was gone, the sunlight felt like a cruel joke. It filtered through the kitchen window, warm and golden, but every beam seemed to mock me. I remember standing there, gripping the edge of the counter, staring at the empty space in my bank account on my phone screen, and wondering if my life had suddenly slipped into a dream from which I wouldn't wake. My daughter, my only daughter, the one I had poured decades of my soul into, had taken it. At first, I couldn't even feel anger. I felt disbelief, like my mind refused to accept that the person I loved most in the world could betray me in this way. I tried calling her, the little buzzing phone in my hand suddenly heavier than a brick. The line rang and rang until it went to voicemail. My chest tightened with a mix of panic and sorrow. I replayed every moment of her childhood, every bedtime story, every sacrifice, every dinner cooked while she sat at the table smiling, oblivious to the exhaustion I carried. I thought back to the nights I stayed awake worrying if she was warm enough, safe enough, loved enough. And now all that care, all that love, seemed meaningless in the face of what she had done. I remember pacing the small living room, the wooden floor cold under my bare feet. I passed the couch where she used to curl up with her homework, the shelf she had meticulously decorated with little trinkets from school fairs, and the refrigerator. Oh, the refrigerator that had become the silent witness to this chaos. I opened it, almost hoping, in some impossible corner of my mind, to find some clue, some sign that she hadn't really taken everything. But it was just a regular fridge, a few leftovers, a carton of milk, and the quiet emptiness of the life we had shared. The ordinary sight of it only sharpened the pain, each item a reminder that life was still moving on, even if mine had been stolen. The first night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, the darkness heavy, suffocating. My mind raced through memories, imagining her in some far-off city, laughing, drinking, living as if the world belonged to her alone. Anger finally bubbled up, raw and bitter. How dare she? How could she take from me the security I had spent decades building, the safety I had fought for, the dreams I thought we shared? I imagined walking through the streets of her city, confronting her, screaming until my throat burned, shaking her until she understood the gravity of what she had done. But beneath the fury was something sharper, something colder, a fear I wasn't ready to admit. I had given her everything, and in doing so, I had left myself vulnerable. My heart twisted at the thought of losing her, yet my mind screamed that I couldn't let this slide. And in that quiet moment, alone with my thoughts, I realized something terrifying. I had no idea who she really was anymore. The little girl I had raised with such care, who had once clung to my hand in fear of thunderstorms, seemed like a stranger now. The woman on the phone the next day, tearful and shaking, would reveal just how far that stranger had gone and how deep the consequences of her choices could run. When she finally called, her voice barely audible over the line, I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. She told me she had arrived at the apartment, the place she had chosen for her dream trip, and that everything had seemed perfect at first. She had been so proud of herself, thinking she had planned the perfect getaway without any interference from her controlling mother. And then the fridge. She opened it, expecting something ordinary, something mundane. But what she found inside made her scream. Not the scream of fear alone, but of shock, guilt, and disbelief mingled together in a sound that seemed to pierce the air and somehow reach across miles to me. I wanted to yell at her through the phone, to demand answers, to shake her into understanding the weight of what she had done. But instead, I listened, the tension knotting in my stomach, Each word she stammered out, painting a picture more complicated than I had imagined. It wasn't just a matter of theft or money. It was about choices, consequences, and the fragile threads of responsibility we had both ignored for too long. My anger burned, but beneath it a small ember of something else glimmered, the realization that this was not the end, that perhaps in this chaos, in this scream, there was a chance for understanding, for growth, for connection I hadn't yet imagined. The days that followed were a blur of calls, calculations, sleepless nights, and heart-wrenching anticipation. I found myself remembering every moment of her childhood with startling clarity, the scraped knees, the forgotten lunches, the late nights spent comforting her nightmares. Each memory became a battleground of love and frustration, tenderness and betrayal. And slowly, I began to see the bigger picture, the life lessons embedded in every panic-filled phone call, every trembling confession, every tear that fell from her eyes as she explained how she hadn't expected her actions to spiral into this mess. In those long nights, I started to understand that anger alone couldn't define this story. Pain and betrayal were real, yes, but so was the bond we had built over decades, a bond that was frayed but not yet broken. The fridge, the scream, the stolen pension, they were catalysts, not the end. And as I sat there, staring at the darkened kitchen window, I made a quiet vow. I would face this head-on, with all the fear, love, and courage I had left, and I would not let this moment define the rest of our lives. Somewhere in the chaos, redemption was waiting, and we both had to find it, together. The morning after her call, I decided I couldn't stay passive any longer. I couldn't simply sit in my living room, watching my life drain away in bank statements and hypothetical images of her having the time of her life. I packed a small bag, not out of necessity, but out of resolve. I needed to see her, to confront the reality of what had happened, and to understand, finally, the woman she had become. Driving through the city streets, memories of her childhood flooded back with painful clarity. The first time she rode her bike without training wheels, the scraped knees and triumphant smiles, the whispered, "I love you, Mom," in the dark of her bedroom. I had raised her for 18 years, and yet here she was, a stranger in possession of my savings. The fridge. I never thought a simple appliance could hold so much power, so much truth. But that day, when my daughter opened it, it became a symbol of everything she hadn't prepared for, the consequences of her choices, the reckoning she had been avoiding, and the harsh clarity that life sometimes delivers in the most ordinary of packages. I remember her phone call vividly, her voice trembling, almost a whisper of panic and disbelief. "Mom, you have to see this. I don't know what to do." And in that moment, I knew I had to be there, not just as a mother scolding her, but as someone willing to help her face reality. When I arrived at the apartment, the smell hit me first, a mix of spoiled food, leftover sauces, and the faint metallic tang of neglect. But it wasn't just the smell that made me wince. It was the weight of the moment, the tangible reminder of how reckless decisions ripple outward. She stood frozen, hands hovering over the fridge door as if it were some mysterious artifact she had unleashed. Her eyes, wide and watery, met mine with a mix of fear and shame. In that instant, I saw the young girl I had raised, the one who had once hidden under the kitchen table during storms, facing a storm of her own making. Except this time, there were no comforting words or warm embraces to protect her. We didn't speak at first. I just stood there, letting her process, letting her absorb the gravity of what had happened. And then she began, voice breaking, explaining how she had thought she could manage everything, how she had believed that the money was a ticket to freedom, to adventure, to proving herself capable. But reality hit hard. The fridge wasn't just a mess, it was a mirror, reflecting her inexperience, her impulsiveness, and the ripple effect of choices made without foresight. Her scream wasn't just shock, it was the raw, unfiltered sound of a lesson she hadn't been ready to learn. As she spoke, I felt a mix of emotions, anger, yes, but also empathy, sorrow, and a deep, aching love. It's strange how parental love works. Even when someone you care for hurts you, Even when they make devastating mistakes, a part of you can't stop seeing the potential, the heart, the essence that made you care in the first place. I remembered her childhood vividly. Scraped knees and tearful apologies, whispered secrets in the dark. The first time she learned to ride a bike and fell, only to get back up again with my hand on her back. I realized then that this was another fall, another opportunity for her to learn, to grow, and to face the consequences with honesty. Hours passed in that small apartment, filled with tense conversations, apologies, and tearful confessions. She detailed every misstep, the planning without thinking, the panic when she realized the funds were gone, the horror when she opened the fridge and saw the mess she had ignored in her haste to chase excitement. It was painful to hear, yet strangely cathartic. Each word, each tear, each stammering confession chipped away at the wall between us, revealing the human beneath the mistakes. And I began to see not just the recklessness, but the courage in facing it, the first flickers of accountability emerging from the panic. We began cleaning together, slowly, deliberately, like two people repairing not just a fridge, but a relationship. It was exhausting, physically and emotionally, but every scrub, every discarded piece of spoiled food, was a step toward understanding. I could see her transforming before my eyes, from a girl running from consequences to a young woman confronting them head-on. And in that effort, in that shared labor, I felt the beginnings of forgiveness, not the instant, magical kind, but the real, earned kind that grows when empathy and honesty meet. As the sun began to set, the apartment smelled fresh, almost normal again. But it wasn't just the fridge that had changed. Something deeper had shifted. My daughter had begun to see the weight of her actions, the importance of responsibility, and the value of considering others before herself. And I, in turn, realized that being a mother isn't about control or punishment. It's about guidance, patience, and knowing when to let someone stumble so they can learn to stand again. By nightfall, exhaustion settled over both of us, but there was also a quiet sense of accomplishment, of growth, of fragile redemption. We had faced fear, shame, and betrayal, and had come out the other side, bruised but wiser. The scream, the mess, the stolen pension, all of it had become more than mistakes. It had become a bridge to understanding, a path to rebuilding trust and connection. And for the first time in a long while, I believed that even the most chaotic moments could carry profound lessons if we had the courage to face them together. The next morning, the apartment felt almost sacred in its quiet. The fridge, once a symbol of chaos and fear, now seemed ordinary, harmless even, but its lessons lingered in the air like a scent that won't fade. My daughter and I moved slowly, side by side, unpacking groceries, organizing shelves, and quietly sharing words that had been too heavy to speak before. Every small task carried weight. Every glance between us carried understanding. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that follows storms, the calm that allows reflection and growth. I watched her as she carefully cleaned a shelf, hands trembling slightly, eyes focused, jaw tight with concentration. It wasn't just about washing surfaces or discarding spoiled leftovers. It was her way of confronting the mistakes she had made, of taking ownership in a way that went beyond words. And as I observed, I realized that this was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when fear and guilt transformed into responsibility, when rebellion became accountability, and when a scream could lead to awakening. I felt a swelling of pride, tempered by the pain of what had led us here, but unmistakably real. We talked about everything, the trip, the pension, the choices, the consequences, and I let her speak without interruption, without judgment, holding the space for honesty even when it stung. She admitted her fears, her impulsiveness, and her regrets, tears falling freely as she recounted every moment she wished she could undo. And I told her what I had felt: betrayal, anger, fear, and the suffocating weight of love turned into heartbreak. I let her know that I had questioned her character, that I had wondered if I truly knew the woman she had become. But I also told her, with every fiber of my being, that I still believed in her, that the bond we shared could survive this, could grow stronger if we allowed it. We spent hours in that tiny kitchen, cleaning, talking, and sometimes sitting in silence. And gradually, I began to see her transform before my eyes, not into the child I had raised, but into a woman capable of humility, responsibility, and courage. She laughed softly at her own mistakes, acknowledging the absurdity of how a fridge could teach a lesson so profound, and I found myself laughing too, not mockingly but with relief, the kind of laugh that comes after crying and confronting the storm. In that moment, I realized that growth often comes in unexpected forms, through the most ordinary objects, the simplest triggers, and the moments we least anticipate. As the day faded into evening, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't thought possible. The anger and fear that had consumed me for so long were still there, yes, but they had softened, replaced by a tentative hope. I knew that the road ahead would not be easy. Trust once broken doesn't rebuild overnight. But I also knew that we had taken the first, most important steps. We had faced truth without flinching, embraced accountability, and chosen connection over resentment. And that, I realized, was the real lesson. That love endures when we are willing to confront pain, to forgive, and to grow together. Later, as we sat quietly with cups of tea in our hands, I looked at her and saw the woman I had raised, the girl who had once clung to me in fear, now standing tall, facing the world with eyes wide open, learning the hard truths that life demands. And I understood that the scream, the stolen pension, the chaos of that week had all been part of a journey neither of us would ever forget. It was messy, painful, and beautiful all at once. I felt a deep, unwavering certainty settle in my chest. Parenting isn't about shielding someone from mistakes. It's about teaching them to face them, survive them, and rise stronger. My daughter had learned that lesson in a way I could never have forced upon her. And I, in turn, had learned to release my control, to trust in her growth, and to embrace the fragile, imperfect beauty of our bond. By the time I left the apartment that evening, I carried no resentment, no lingering anger, only a quiet pride and a sense of peace. Life would continue to challenge us, mistakes would happen again, but the foundation we had rebuilt, through tears, screams, and honest confrontation, would endure. I realized that the journey of love and growth is never linear. Sometimes it's triggered by the smallest, most unexpected moments. And sometimes the most ordinary things, like a fridge, hold the power to change everything. And in that stillness, I understood something profoundly simple yet impossibly powerful. Love isn't about perfection, money, or control. It's about presence, forgiveness, and courage. It's about standing together when the world shakes beneath your feet, about learning and growing, and about trusting that even after mistakes, even after betrayal, connection can survive. And in that understanding, I finally felt whole again, ready to face whatever came next, together with my daughter, in honesty, love, and the messy, beautiful reality of life.